Hi Ben, just following up from your most recent session. One of the things I touched on at the end, I've sent you some videos obviously relating to ball flight variables that we discussed. You've got the down line footage and the images relating to the position of the club, position of the left arm at P5, P6. So that's just extra food for thought. I think judging by your email and your text, you're getting your understanding of that is improving all the time, which is great. But what I touched on towards the end of the session was that sometimes it's an unfair appraisal of your swing when you just look at how you've progressed from, say, January to February. You started the process back in September, I believe. Let's just have a quick look at the dates here. Sorry, November. So from November to February is what we're looking at here. The swing on the left is you at the end of your first session. So it's not the original swing that you were making. It's an improved version. We've tweaked a few things at setup. The swing on the right is the final footage that I took from face on in your most recent visit. So November versus February, which I think is a nice it's a nice thing to look at because you see some quite substantial changes here. First and foremost, if we look at address, we've now got much more flex in the lead leg. Feeling like the weight's moving forward by flexing the lead leg at address a little bit more. The right knee is nowhere near as kinked in as it previously was. Everything's a little bit more as you would expect with stack and tilt, so a little bit more emphasis on the weight forward. We've also tweaked the foot floor. The right foot now is turning out a little bit more, so some nice changes at setup that are relative to the work that you're trying to do on your swing. As we take the club back and we get to approximately P3, let's match those two up. We're starting to see, because of the difference at setup and the way the legs are working, remember how we've discussed the legs are a linkage system, they work a certain way, the body works a certain way. We're seeing a little bit more flex forward with the lead leg, and we're seeing a right hip that sits a little bit more above the left hip rather than the opposite. So the hips now are turning on a more tilted angle, which is going to help you stay a little bit more centered and certainly make it a more efficient move to the top. P4, again, a little bit of a difference in the knees as we'd expect. The left arm, the degree of movement in the left arm has increased a little bit because of the better use of the lower body, and we're starting to see a fraction more separation between the two centres, which is the side bend towards the target that we talked about at the start of your session. So it's not this big exaggerated move that maybe people think it is. It's just the separation of the two measurable centres. Here we've maintained a fraction of forward bend, whereas here we're extending more during the backswing, which is why the lead arm has just travelled that little bit further, and why the upper centre is just fractionally more above the ball than it would normally be. So again, some nice changes there towards the top. But then take the swing down to P5. Much more sort of pressure, if you will, going into that lead foot. Left knee moving down and forward more than it did previously. Now getting out in front of the lead ankle rather than being on top of it. So these are all changes and observations that, if we need to discuss, we can. But I'm just observations on how much change you've made in the 3-month period that you've been working on this. A little bit more lag because of the better lower body action. So some nice knock-on effects there. We'll just play this through now to P6. Starting to see the gap between the arm and the side diminish a little bit. We talked about how when we work the accumulators differently, the sort of the left arm moving away from the right shoulder, but it can also move down more and stay in more, and that will have a knock-on effect. So we're now starting to see that, you know, the right elbow now is starting to get tucked into the side much more, which is moving the butt of the club and the release point a little bit further forward. So the radius of the swing is a little bit tighter. It's going to be a little bit easier to keep the club in at 6. It's going to be a little bit easier to hit down on the golf ball, etc, etc. And again, a little bit more flex in that lead leg, certainly more weight forward coming into impact. Through the hip, and this really is what we got together for in the first place. And I think you give yourself a little bit of a hard time on occasion. If you look at the differences in the move through the ball now, particularly in regards to how the lower body works, the knees, you know, we needed to appreciate that you, at the start of the process, you didn't need more hip slide. You needed a lot more extension, and you needed to understand the 3 main aspects of the through swing. So the turn, the slide, and the extension. The rate of closure on the club face is decreasing, so you can see when the shaft, the rate of closure, rate of overtaking, when the shaft hits parallel to the ground previously, it was below the level of the belt. It's now getting more above the level of the belt. When you do the drill, where you make that little swing and you sort of swing through to that desired finish, we see that happens a little bit later. So we're moving in the right direction. We're going from below the level of the belt to just above, and we know how to get it more above, etc, etc. So again, some good changes there. As we progress through, we can see there's far less flex in the knees, the change in the tilt of the neck, just much less flex going in, or much less flex being maintained, and a much more tucked look to the finish. So back to the 2 measurable centres. Here we've extended in the neck, the spine, and the lower body. Here we've maintained flexion in the lower body, fraction in the spine, and again in the neck. So there's certainly more extension going in there, and the overall look now through the ball is much more what you were looking for, like I say, at the start of the process. Flexing the pelvis, far less flexing the pelvis. Could you make that more emphasised? Yes. Do you need to? Not necessarily. The donkey work's been done, as we said at the end of last session. It's just a case of tidying up, making things a little bit better, improving your understanding of certain areas. And as you do that, as your understanding improves, the practice sessions that you can have, the quality of those will improve as well. And that can only that can only be a positive thing going into future seasons. Good luck with it. Some great progress there. And I look forward to meeting up soon and doing some further work on your game. Well done.